What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 12 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here with your wide receiver preview, this time around to get you all set for week number 12. If you missed it, go back and check out the quarterbacks and running backs. I've previewed those already, and I'll have your defense preview out later tonight as well, followed by a depth chart update on Friday to get you all set for all of the games in week number 12. Let's dive right into the receivers. Let's go game by game. 4 games on the schedule, and it starts off with a matchup between the Montreal Alouettes and the Toronto Argonauts. A big matchup in the East Division. But looking at Montreal's side of things first, notably for the Alouettes, no BJ Cunningham for the next while after he was placed on the 6-game injured list. So we know it will be Reggie White Jr. taking his place in the starting lineup. The depth chart for that game is out already. I'll touch on it more fully tomorrow. But White Jr. will be getting the start in his place. He comes in $2,500. Here's where I see things for Montreal this week. You have Matt Schultz at quarterback again. Eugene Lewis and Jake Weineke are the two guys that lead the way when it comes to receiving for Montreal. It's been no question about that all season long. And I don't know if there is a guy that has produced touchdowns more consistently in the CFL that I've seen than Jake Weineke, who's produced them game in and game out. You can pretty much bank on that. I have both these guys as yellow light category this week. They're both coming in at over $10,000, which is a high price to pay. If you want to get 2.5 points per $1,000 out of them, you need to get basically 26 points. In Eugene Lewis's case, he's averaged 14.6 on the year. He's had a couple of those big games, 29 points, 25.2, 20.2. He's had some big games, but he's also had some duds in recent weeks as well. In his past 2 games, just 6.5 and 10.5 for Eugene Lewis. So I'm a little cautious on him. I think he has the potential for a big game, certainly, and has one of the best big play potentials in the CFL. But more often than not, a lot of weeks this year for that price point, you've been a little disappointed with the games you've gotten out of him. He hasn't been consistent with the big payout. So I say cautious on Eugene Lewis. Jake Weineke, I really wanted to green light him this week. Last week, he produced a big 24.4 point performance, was the go-to receiver, the top scoring receiver in CFL Fantasy. But even then, that's not hitting his full value price, and that was a great week. He's only had 1 game this year where he hit that, and only 2 games where he has put up over 20 points. So, or 2 or 3, I guess. 1 game was over 30, the one where he did hit full value. So he's got a decent floor, so if you're looking for a high-priced receiver to fit in your lineup to fill up the cap, Weineke's probably my favorite one, even if he doesn't hit you full value. You're still going to get a decent floor of 10 to 15 points out of him on most weeks. But I would be cautious on him putting up a 30-point week every single time. I think that's a little bit out of stretch for him. Getting into some of the other options here, Quan Bray. I don't like that option. 8.8 points is his average. Does not seem to get a whole lot of targets his way. He might get a couple more with Cunningham being out, but BJ Cunningham was only getting 3 to 5 targets a game to begin with. So I don't think a ton of those go in Bray's direction. In his past 4 games, 12.6, 11.9, 2.4, and 8. His highest total of the year being 12.7 points, which has not even hit 2 points per $1,000 ratio. So I say stay away from Quan Bray. Keon Julian Grant did have a decent game last week, put up 6.5 points, hit his full value mark. But that was kind of an outlier on the season. His highest total outside of that, 3.8 points on the year. I don't see that being a consistent production for him. And I'm yellow lighting Reggie White Jr. just because, value plays $2,500. If you get like 6 points out of them, you get full bang for your buck. I'm not saying go ahead and play him because I have no info on this guy. I'll be open and honest about that. I have no idea what to expect out of him, but if you're the type of person that likes to take a chance on a receiver getting into the lineup for the first time of the year and trying to make a name for himself, $2,500 for Reggie White Jr. could be a potential intriguing play there. Looking at the Argos side of things, this is where I really like some of the options available. Toronto's depth chart is out as well. No Eric Rogers, he's still out on the 6-game injured list. So highest price receiver option for them this week is Ricky Collins Jr. He comes in at $7,216. You want to get 18 points out of him. How many times has he hit that this year? Once, back in week number 1 against Calgary. He has had a couple of games of decent production, 14, 15 points. But in 2 of his last 3 games, he's also hit 3.2 and 6. So I think the price is a little high and the production is a little inconsistent there to go in Collins Jr.'s direction, especially last time out against Montreal, just 3.2 points for him there. Much the same with Tavares Daniels. Price is a little better at just over 6,000. 15.2 points is what you're looking for. And he's hit that a couple of times this year on 2 different occasions. But more often than not, if you see totals from him that are even less than 1 point per $1,000 you spend. So most weeks on the year, he is not worth the money. And I really like a lot of the other cheaper options here in Toronto if you're looking to fill in an Argos receiver. And to me, one of my favorite options is Chandler Worthy. $5,496. Full production line is 13.7 points. He's played 5 games and he's averaged 12.5. And he's in as a starting receiver now for Toronto, on top of handling return duties yet too. Seemingly, I would imagine he continues to handle those. And in 2 of his past 3 games, including one against the Alouettes, he has put up 22.1 points. So it's been pretty good production. He did have a down game in between there with 4.8, but I don't think the salary's through the roof on Chandler Worthy either, where you're going to get a floor of a couple of points at least from the returns. And then if he gets involved in the offense, he's got big play potential, has put up a couple touchdowns on the year. I think he could easily hit the 13.7 mark. I also like Curley Gittens Jr., who had his best day of the season last game. 17.5 points is what he scored. 9 games on the year, he's averaged 7.6. To be fair, the games he has performed well, he have been a little bit touchdown dependent, a lot of it, and then the games he hasn't, he's put up less than 5 points. But again, the price is lower. I think he's a good option to take a chance on, to have another good week, especially if him and Bethel Thompson continue that trend of what we've seen from them in recent games. He's hit his full value 4 times on the year, including in 2 of his last 3 games, 13.8, 1.9, and 17.5 in the past 3. So I like the option of Curley Gittens Jr. this week, and I also like at a premium value play as the lowest price you can get, $2,500 Damien Jean-Pierre. He in his past 3 games has put up full value, 13.1, 10.6, and 6.9 in there in the starting lineup, averaging 8.1 points in 4 games this year. I think again, low cost, low risk. He will be a starting option at receiver for the Argos. McLeod Bethel Thompson can throw, for a lot of yards and light up the game, and like we saw him do a little bit against the Alouettes a couple weeks ago. And so I think that's a great option there as well. So a couple really good potential picks here from the Argos. Dejon Brissett will be a backup again, only averaged 1.5 points in 9 games this year. I don't like him, but Chandler Worthy, Curley Gittens Jr., Damien Jean-Pierre, I don't think you could go wrong necessarily with any of those 3 picks. Getting into the next game, Ottawa and Hamilton. Let's start with the Red Blacks side of things. Devontae Dedmon, I'm normally very high on this guy, but he is out this week, I believe. He did go down due to injury last game, and it hasn't looked good. So At least this game, Devontae Dedmon will be out potentially a decent amount longer yet as well. So do not pick him this week, even if you are tempted based on his past performances. I highly doubt he will be in the lineup. The option I really like for Ottawa is Ryan Davis, $6,342, 10 games on the year. He's averaged 12.8 points, and you're looking for 15.9 out of him. 12.8 puts him on average in 2 points per $1,000 range. So on the average game, you are getting at least close to full value out of Davis. And he's been, pretty good on the weeks where he gets involved on the offense, and Ottawa's offense is a little bit better. Past 4 games for him, 18.2, 19.1, 2.2, a bit of a down game there, but everybody on Ottawa did have one that week, and 15.7. So full value in 2 of those 4 weeks, close to full value in the last game for them. For Ottawa, and I think he's the go-to receiver in that offense. I don't know what to expect from their quarterbacks this week, with Caleb Evans getting another start, but Doc Hodges probably getting some playing time. But the also extra boost we might see from Davis handling some of the kick returns could be helpful here as well. We'll see who is listed as the returner on the depth chart. They may bring another guy kind of off the practice roster to handle that, but we could see Davis get in for a return or 2 to boost the totals there. So I like that option. I'm in the yellow light category on Kenny Stafford at 5,471. He's played 4 games in Ottawa so far this year. The last game he put up 13.5 points. He's had, his first game of the year against the Ticats, who they faced this week. He had 0 points, but I chalk that up as him kind of getting used to things in the lineup, them integrating him, not really, easing him into it, I guess is the words I was looking for. And since then, 12.4, 10.5, and 13.5. So he's hit decent value in the past 3 games, hasn't hit the full 13.7 you're looking for. So I'm cautious on Stafford again, not too sure what to expect from Ottawa this week against the Ticats, but I think Stafford has been producing pretty well in the games he's played and could be a good option. I don't like the option of RJ Harris. He's played 10 games this year. Some of them he occasionally hits value, but more often than not, in fact, 4 of his last 5 games have last 6 games, have been under 8 points. His price continues to drop, and maybe it will get to a point where I consider putting him in the lineup, but I do not like RJ Harris this week. Nor do I like Nate Behar, whose usage in that Ottawa offense has just gone downhill ever since week number 6. In 3 of his last 5 games, under 2 points for him. He did have 6.9 2 games ago, but has not hit full value since that Week 6 matchup with BC. And Michael Klukas, if he does get into the lineup at all, has very minimal usage for Ottawa, so stay away from him there as well. Going to the Hamilton side, Hamilton is always an interesting team to talk about when it comes to receivers, because they have a couple of guys that are just so high priced that it will hardly ever make sense to put them in your fantasy lineup. Brandon Banks, Braylon Addison, both great receivers. Banks is having a bit of a down year, has missed some time due to injury, and will be, presumably it looks like he will be back in the lineup this week, but in his past 3 games that he's played, or in every game since week number 1 where he put up 15.7, his highest total on the year, he's put up under 1 point per $1,000. So even in his best game of the year, he's only given you about half of what you have to get out of him for it to be worth it. So do not put Brandon Banks in your lineup. Even if he gets back on track, 30.4 is a really impossible number to bank on. To banks on, even, if I want to go for the word play there. Braylon Addison is a bit of a better option. He's averaged 15 points through his 2 games. 17 in his debut against Montreal, 12.9 last time out against Toronto. I could see him being a receiver that kind of dominates a game, but even then, 27 is such a hard total for him to hit. I think the price is too high, and I say stay away from Braylon Addison. Jalen Acklin continues to be a guy that mystifies me. I was high on him, had him as a green light for many weeks in a row, and he dropped dud performances in those. And then last week, I think I finally said stay away from him, and he came out and put up a 21.6 point performance, his best game since week number 1. Maybe there's some connection there. Jeremiah Mazzoli, Jalen Acklin. 2 of his best games of the year have come with Mazzoli at the helm, who has only played 4 games on the year. So I do like him as a bit of a better option now than I did before in recent weeks. He's not green light to me because 4 games prior, in the last 4 games prior to his big performance last week, his highest total was 10 points. So I think Acklin could cover you full value this week, but I'm always hesitant based on those other performances. Tim White, I also am a little bit in the same boat. His salary has gone up slightly enough where he hasn't quite hit his value that often on the season anymore. In his past 3 games, 7.8, 7.4, and 6.9. I don't think he's a bad kind of mid-priced option to take because, he's been pretty consistent of even when he is having a bit more of a down week. Putting up around 7 points, you miss 3 points off of the full value line. It doesn't make or break your week as it would with one of the higher priced options. But he has not put up a monster game since week number 5 against the Argos. So I say be a bit cautious on Tim White. Stephen Dunbar Jr. is the option I love for the Ticats, though. $36.73 price point is... you need 9.2 points out of him. He's averaged 10.5. So on average, you're getting full bang for your buck out of Stephen Dunbar Jr., including in his last 3 games where he's put up 12.7, 10.5, and 13.2. So very consistent producer in recent weeks for Hamilton. I do like that option of Stephen Dunbar Jr. to deliver that once again. And then David Ungerer, I say stay away there. 3.2 point average out of 9 games this year. Nothing to write home about. And also saying stay away from Marcus Green. He played his first game last week, or last game. They were on a bye last week, I believe. Put up 5.6 points in that one, which was close to the 6.3 you would hope for. Solely based on the return game. He was a backup at receiver. He has missed practice all week this week, so I'm thinking he is likely out of the lineup. And even if he is in, I think there are better $2,500 value plays than Marcus Green. Moving on to the next game here, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the BC Lions, a rematch from a couple weeks ago where the Bombers offense torched BC's defense for 400 yards through the air, and over 200 of those coming via Kenny Lawler of the Bombers. $8,907 price. Full value line, 22.3 points. He's averaged 16.8 on the year. I'm a little cautious on Lawler this week. It's so tempting to go his direction based off of the performance he put up on BC just 2 games ago, where he put up 38.5 points. The price is a little higher for me, though, and, he has been a great receiver on the year, but he has not put up, in recent weeks. Besides that, he had one 20.7 point performance, but other than that, his highest total was 15. So Lawler is near green light category for me. I don't know my color combinations enough to know what like a yellowish green color name would be. But I would say he's somewhat in the middle there. I think he could have a very good week for you. Last time, if you took him at that salary, though, last game, 11.2 points is what you got, which was a bit of a disappointment. So it's kind of hard to gauge which Bomber receiver is going to be the go-to option. Last week, it was Rasheed Bailey, and the week before, it was Lawler. So he could be a very good option this week. I'm slightly hesitant to go his direction, though, but only ever so slightly. Much the same with Nick Dembski, $7,445. Last week I talked about him as the green-white option for the Bombers. I took him as my receiver last week, and he dropped a dud, 3.9 points only. Before that, over 18 points in 3 of his last 4 games. He had been very consistent, but just didn't have the usage come his way last game. I expect a bit of a course correction here with that. I don't imagine we're going to see Dembski with minimal usage for 2 straight weeks. The only thing I'm cautious about is the production going to be enough to hit that 18.6. And I think it's going to be close, but I'm not 100% sold on that one. Rasheed Bailey is the option I like this week. He has been a great receiver for the Bombers this year. $5,919 salary. Man, remember when he was, I think he started the year maybe at $3,000, maybe even at $2,500. Look how far he's shot up the charts here. 14.8 points is his value line. He's averaged 11.6 on the year. 22.5 is what he put up last time out. And in his past 4 games, 13.2, 11.3, 12, and 22.5. So he's been hovering right around that line in basically most of his games this year. Besides the season opener against Hamilton and a couple games against the Riders, have we seen Rasheed Bailey put up, at least 11 points, which is close and hovering around that line. I think he gets involved in that offense very well. Big plays, a couple catches a game, some decent rushing plays here and there. Yeah, I like Rasheed Bailey as an option, especially since he's a cheaper play than Lawler and Dembski, and I could see similar production levels on any given week for all of them. Darvin Adams seems to be just a non-factor in the Bombers' offense. He's put up his highest total in the past 3 weeks was 4.3 points. I'm not paying $5,677 for that. Drew Wolodarski has also had, mostly down weeks, only 1 week of hitting decent value in his past 5 games. Past 2 games, 3.8 and 0, and you certainly don't want to 0 in your lineup. Janarian Grant, Bombers kick returner. Last game, 5.5 points out of him. You want 6.8. The Bombers' return game really hasn't exploded for anything spectacular this year, so if you're banking on a guy who handles kick returns to give you a big week, I don't know if Grant is the one. I know Rock Thomas put up the big return against the Lions last week, and maybe that makes it tempting, but until we see the Bombers' return guy break one for a touchdown, or at least a very long one, I think it's safe to stay away there. And Kelvin McKnight, likely a backup in the lineup, so I don't think is worth fantasy consideration this week. Looking at BC side of things, Lucky Whitehead is still out of the lineup, so Brian Burnham is the top-priced receiver option. Look, I can talk about all of BC's receivers real quick here and say I don't really like any of them this week because they have the matchup with Winnipeg. It's very much matchup-based. Last time out against the Bombers, we saw a tough game for all of them except for Keon Hatcher, and last game against Calgary even, a big rough day there for the BC Lions offense. So they face the Bombers defense that doesn't give up touchdowns through the air. They don't give up very many points at all, and they've done a decent job of shutting down passing yards and basically the game as a whole this season. So I think BC, a good chunk of their receivers here are kind of higher on the price end, mid to higher, and I don't think it's worth the price against the Bombers. Burnham at over $10,000, 26.2 points. He hasn't hit that yet on the year. His highest total is 24.2. His highest total in the past 4 games, just 16.3. Javon Catoy, maybe against another opponent would be a tempting option. Last week put up 11.6, but hasn't hit over the 15.6 mark back since week number 6 against Ottawa. So don't really love that option in this matchup. Same thing with Lamar Durant, hasn't really put up a fantastic game yet this year. Shaq Johnson is averaging 3.5 in 9 games. Jacob Scarfoni, If he does get in the lineup, very minimal usage for him. And Keon Hatcher is the only one I would maybe consider out of BC because his price is so low. It's a decent value play. 8.4 point average for him on the year. And he did have a down game last week where he didn't get the ball until the fourth quarter and only put up 4.8 points. But before that, 11.5, 12.8, a 3.7, again, another disappointing game, and a 9.4. So he hit value in 3 of his 5 games this year. And if you're doing that and your price is low, not a bad guy to take a chance on for a cheap receiver option. But certainly, I think the other value plays have a better matchup than Keon Hatcher does. And getting into our final game, I believe, of the week, the Calgary Stampeders, Saskatchewan Roughriders going head-to-head once again for the third time this month. And Calgary looks like they will be getting some pieces back in the lineup based on practices this week. Kamar Jordan could finally be back in the lineup. Josh Huff missed last game last second due to illness. Could be back in the lineup as well. So here's how I see things for Calgary. You'll notice I have no green light options for them, despite, I will say, 3 Calgary receivers hit their value last game. And the problem with Calgary is just you see this chart is so much longer than anybody else's because they use so many different receivers. Like you look at the depth chart and you see who's starting, but then they've got 3 or 4 backup receivers there as well who also get in for a couple targets and a couple catches each game. So it's hard to necessarily recommend one Calgary receiver because you don't know who is going to get the ball. And that's why I'm saying stay away from Kamar Jordan and Josh Huff. They're higher priced receivers, especially Jordan coming back from injury. I want to see how he performs there, what his usage level looks like. $10,000 a lot to spend and bank on that. Josh Huff, same thing. A little bit higher on the price end for options out of Calgary this week, and need to see a better game out of a big game where he is the go-to receiver, basically, to be worth putting him in the lineup. Markeith Ambles is a yellow light, but it's probably really an orange light, yellow and red combined. For much the same way, I do think Ambles is one of the favorite targets for Bo Levi Mitchell, but they just have not connected that often in recent weeks. He did have a 16.4 point day last time out against the Riders. Last game against BC, though, just 3.3. So he could have a good game, but I'm not sold on Ambles as a play this week. Herja Mayala, I don't recommend on most weeks, pretty much every week this year. The one I want to touch on for a little bit, Richie Sindani. Last week, a lot of people I feel like might be tempted to put him in the lineup this week because he had the big game last week. 6 catches, 60 yards, led the way for the Stampeders. But to me, that was such an anomaly. I mean, he had one game against Hamilton earlier this year where he put up a touchdown, but other than that, barely any usage for him all season. I think his highest total besides that was like 4.5 points or something like that. So more often than not, he does not get the targets his way. Do not overhype the performance from last week for Sindani is what I will say. Malik Henry, Nick Hawley, Luther Hakunavanu, I think are all interesting plays at pretty much bottom salaries. They've all averaged more than their 2.5 points per $1,000 range so far this year. And the reason I'm not greenlighting any of them is, like I mentioned already, you don't know which receivers are going to first, A, be in the lineup, B, actually get targets their way, and or be starting, and C, what they're going to do with those targets. So if I knew for sure that, say, Hakunavanu, who had a big game last week, and Bo Levi Mitchell seems to be pretty high on him, if I knew he was going to be starting at receiver and there weren't going to be other guys rotating in, then yeah, I would put him in at that price all day long. But it's tough, I think, a little bit, given the roster makeup of the Stampeders. It's also tough for guys like Malik Henry and Nick Hawley, just not knowing for sure who's going to be handling return duties for them. If either of these options we know for sure is handling kick returns, then that boosts them up, in my opinion, especially if they're getting involved in the offense as well. But it's hard to know because Calgary does not list the return man on their depth chart. I think any of these guys could hit you a good week this week, but I do have to say be cautious based on Calgary's depth chart. And then Colton Hunchak doesn't really get too much done in the lineup when he is in. And Dan Williams III, same thing. So I say stay away from either of those. And then getting into the last team to talk about here. This is the most interesting team, I think, to talk about this week for CFL Fantasy, because the Saskatchewan Roughriders have two guys that are seemingly, potentially, it's looking good at this point in the week, going to be in the lineup for the first time this year for them. Not the first time this year, I guess, in the case of Shaq Evans. First time in a while since week 2. That Evans will be back in the lineup. Duke Williams will be making his Riders debut this week, it seems. And this could do wonders for the passing attack for the Riders this year. I mean, we're looking at potentially a top 5 receivers of Duke Williams, Kyron Moore, Shaq Evans, Keon Schaefer-Baker, who's been fantastic this year, and Braden Lenius, who's been a decent producer as well. So what does this mean for the share of targets for the Riders? Well, it means I say stay away from Kyron Moore, because he has seemingly been, a go-to heavy target guy for the Riders throughout this season without Evans in the lineup, who normally takes the bulk of them. But you want to get 19.9 points out of him. He hasn't hit that yet this year. His highest total is 18.5, and he's underwhelmed on the value in his last 5 games. I think he will even more now because Williams and Evans are going to take the targets away from him. So I don't like Moore at that price. Keon Schaefer-Baker still, I think, could be a decent option at a $4,542 price. He's had some good games. 3 of his last 5 games, he's hit value with over 14 points in each of them. But 2 of his last 3, he has put up just around 5.7, 5.9. So I'm not saying green light on Schaefer-Baker like I have in more recent games, because I think he's produced well, but he's no longer the number 2 receiver for the Riders. So be cautious on that play there. And I say stay away from the rest of the receivers for Saskatchewan. Braden Lenius should be in the starting lineup, but his kind of target usage has gone down a decent amount in recent weeks, I feel like. 3.3 and 2.9 in his 2 games against Calgary, and it's going to go down even more so now. And for the rest of those guys, I don't expect them to be in the starting lineup this week. So getting back to the new pieces in the offense, though, Duke Williams, $9,325. You want 23.3 points out of him. This guy dominated the CFL last time he was here when he played for Edmonton, and he went off to the NFL, and now he's back. And I expect a big week out of Duke Williams. 23.3 points. I think he could hit that. I think he is going to be targeted frequently by Cody Fajardo. I also think, Fajardo has complained a little bit about the lack of deep balls and receivers that can go up and bring them down this year. And while Williams and Shaq Evans are 2 of the best when it comes to that. So I think we could see a big pass going Williams' direction. The only reason I don't say green light is because this is a guy playing his first game with a new team. And if you're banking on that with $9,000 of your CFL fantasy cap, that is a little bit nerve-wracking. So I don't say lock it in because we haven't seen him play for the Riders yet, but I think he could be a very good play this week if you feel like living on the edge a little bit and taking your shot on that. It's something I'm considering, I will say that. Shaq Evans, if he is ready to go, if he is back in the lineup, I like him as a play this week at $7,156, and I like him a little bit more than Williams because of that about $2,000 cheaper price. Played 2 games this year, left the second one pretty early due to injury, though. Only put up 2.8 in that one. Put up 13.9 in his first game of the year against BC. Shaq Evans, much the same as Duke Williams. Big play receiver, guy who can go grab a deep ball and put up a big gain there. Good touchdown guy. I think having him back in the lineup, I think Fajardo and him are going to pick up where they left off from that 2019 season, and I think Evans is going to have a pretty darn good day here. I can see him hitting at least 15 points, and I think 17.9 is a very attainable total for Shaq Evans, and is my top recommended play from the Riders if he is ready to go this week. So those are your wide receiver options for week number 12. I know there's a lot to take in, so many options available to go through, and sometimes it's hard to pick and choose one over the other. I feel like this week in particular, I didn't have a ton of green light options there. I think it's a little bit muddy on a lot of the plays from around the league this week, so make of that what you will. Make sure you get your lineup set for week 12. As I mentioned off the top of the show, go back, check out my quarterback and running back previews already out, and stay tuned tonight for the defense preview as well. And then we'll have those depth charts on Friday, and I'll go through them all. I'll touch on who's playing and who's not, and you can make your lineup decisions based on that. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section or tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. That starts with a K. A link to that's in the video description. And if you want to play CFL Fantasy alongside myself and other viewers, check out the link in the video description to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix group over on the official CFL Fantasy site. You can play alongside myself and other viewers this week and every week throughout the 2021 CFL season. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.